The last bale of alfalfa steamed faintly in the pale morning, a square block exhaling its own breath like a sleeping animal, and Mathis Calder stood on the cracked loading dock with twine marks pressed into his palms. He was 12 and small for his age, a narrow boy with hands browned by sun and a way of listening that made even the cattle look over to see what he'd heard. The Caldwell County Co-op lot smelled like mineral salt, diesel, and wet burlap, the kind of smell he liked because it meant things were useful. It meant the day had something for his hands to do. He leaned the hay hook against his boot and glanced toward the lane where the gravel turned white under the first light, waiting for his mother's truck to appear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. A jay lifted from the fence line and scolded the world for no reason Mathis could tell. He wiped the twine-cut indentations against his forearm. The winter had been cheap on rain. The pond at the lower pasture had a ring of gray mud that made the cattle step like women lifting their skirts. Their cow dog, Digger, slept under the dock with his nose on his paws, twitching at quail dreams. Mathis picked up the hook again when he heard tires move slow on gravel and then a laugh that caught like a sawtooth. "Look if it ain't Mr. Cornbread," a voice said, and the words slipped under Mathis's shirt like a cold hand. He knew the voice before he turned. Cole Brixby, 3 grades up and heavy with a kind of meat that wasn't working muscle but hours of gasoline food and the strong permission of a man who taught his son not to lose. 2 boys trailed behind him, Wyatt with a permanent grin and Kellen with a face like a foreclosed house. Cole had a feed sack over one shoulder, but he set it on the dock without care as if the feed inside were a thing that could not be bruised. "Morning," Mathis said, because Mama said manners weren't surrender. He kept his voice steady. Cole looked him up and down like a crooked fence post. "Your mama send you to work or to beg?" he asked. Wyatt laughed before he knew why. Kellen pushed his boot heel on the stray length of twine at Mathis's feet and ground it into the splintered dock boards. "We work same as you," Mathis said. "Mr. Garvey's counting pallets and back." He lifted the hay hook and turned away to pull the next bale close. It was the right choice most days, the work first, the words later. But Cole's hand caught the back of Mathis's shirt and twisted, and suddenly Mathis's feet were doing a slow, helpless waltz with nothing to hold. "You hear this runt?" Cole said into the air. "He thinks he's a man because he can drag rabbit food." He pushed Mathis toward the edge, where the dock shadow cut off into raw morning. Mathis felt the boards under his boots like ribs, each gap another mouth his foot could fall into. He kept his elbows close. The hay hook clattered away. Digger barked once under the dock and then went quiet the way dogs do when they choose to trust their boy. "Let me go," Mathis said. He hated how small his voice sounded, like it had dried out on the way up his throat. "Or what?" Cole said. His breath smelled like cherry soda and something sour. "Your mama gonna come take my lunch money?" He twisted Mathis's shirt tighter and then stepped enough to make Mathis shuffle back, a step nearer the edge where sunlight waited like a white, indifferent reporter. The lot was quiet at this hour. Mr. Garvey's voice came faint through the warehouse wall, counting inventory to a man who never spoke. Mathis used the only thing he had. He looked Cole straight in the eyes and didn't blink. It made Cole flinch just a shade, only visible to someone who spent a lot of life noticing small things. Then Wyatt popped the strap on Mathis's cap from behind and it fell, rolling off the dock into the powder of caliche dust. "Pick it up," Cole said. "Be polite." Mathis calculated the distance, the jump, the time it would take to climb back up. He also calculated, the way his mother would, how long words took to bruise. He stepped off the dock. His knees took the jolt. He reached for his cap, and that's when the feed sack hit him in the shoulder hard enough to tip him sideways. The grit went into his mouth. He tasted earth that had been a million years of something else before it was this. His palms scraped. "Oops," Wyatt said, and Cole laughed with his whole throat. Mathis stood. He didn't spit the dust out, he swallowed it, because spitting was an answer and he didn't want to give them any answers. He climbed back onto the dock without looking at any of their faces. His hands didn't shake, but his heart did something stranger, an old, slow drumbeat he knew from days the wind came up wrong and the cattle bunched in the corner for no reason you could see yet. "Thought we were playing," Cole said, and his smile turned as empty as a grain bin in August. "Come on. Don't be that way." He reached again. Mathis moved away clean, the way you step around a misplaced rake tooth. "Hey," Cole said, and this time the word had the flat authority of his father's uniform. He threw a punch because it was easy. It wasn't much of a punch, more a meat-heavy shove with leopard spots of anger all through it, but it landed enough to make Mathis stumble. The world of small sounds did something strange then. The J quit. The diesel upslope coughed once and went still. Even Mr. Garvey's counting shuddered. Mathis did not cry. The body wants to. The body is a dog that way and has to be trained. He stood up and put his cap back on. "Leave it," Cole said, and Wyatt stepped in front of Mathis, too close and laughing because he could not think of anything else to do. Mathis could feel his mother the way you feel a weather front you can't see yet. It wasn't a sound. It was the sense that the day had reached a hinge. He turned his head toward the clatter of bottle crates at the far end of the lot. Not Mama. A delivery man. He was alone, 3 against 1, and none of his advantages, quiet, thinking, seeing edges, were wanted by the moment. "What would you do if your mama wasn't?" Wyatt began, and then remembered he wasn't supposed to say what they all knew. That Mathis's mother, Leah Calder, had friends who wore patched leather the color of motor oil and brought smiles into rooms like good weather. That she could change her own oil, run fence, argue the price down on a used welder, and look a county commissioner in the eye until he remembered his manners. That she was the kind of woman you didn't lean on because you didn't know what was behind her. Wyatt's mouth closed with a click of embarrassed teeth. Cole noticed. He said the only thing that could put the fire back in his boys. "His mom's not here," he said. "And when she gets here, I'll explain the county's trespass laws real slow." He lifted his chin toward the sheriff's decal on his own cap. His father's job rode on his head like a second skull. Mathis felt the dock planks in his feet again. He understood something in that moment, some long line running under what people said. Cole didn't want to fight, he wanted permission to be what he'd been taught to be. Permission came from fear. It was like turning on the irrigation at the upper field. Once you opened the gate, the water ran where it could and nothing was thirsty anymore. He straightened. He looked at the place where Cole's jaw softened near his ear. He didn't swing, he wasn't stupid. But he said, "You don't own the ground I'm standing on." It was a small sentence. It rang off the metal siding anyway, like someone had thrown a tool the wrong way. Cole's hand moved without thinking and shoved. Mathis went back against the stacked pallets, shoulders striking the edge. The pain drew a breath out of him he couldn't get back. "Hey!" Mr. Garvey's voice came at last, corrugated with age. "Knock it off out there." The door clanged open and he stood there with a clipboard and the wrong kind of concern, the one that wonders about insurance before anything else. Cole's eyes slipped away and then returned. "Just fun," he said. He fell. Mathis held Mr. Garvey's gaze for a fraction of a second, long enough to say, "You see this?" Long enough to say, "Remember me." He kept his mouth quiet, he couldn't afford the kind of help that felt like pity. Mr. Garvey's gaze slid to the sheriff's decal on Cole's hat and then to the feed sacks with the wrong brand torn and spilling. He said the sentence men say to oil the world. "Boys will be boys." It put a taste in Mathis's mouth worse than dust. Cole smiled like a door closing. "Hear that?" he said softly. He turned his hand just enough to let Mathis's shirt go. "Run along, cornbread." He took a step toward the slope where the gravel went white. Wyatt and Kellen trailed behind with the slow bounce of boys who want the world to resume its regular color. Mathis didn't move. He carefully righted the stacked pallets and then picked up the hay hook from where it had fallen. His shoulder throbbed where it met bone. He moved it once and cataloged the pain. It was his pain, and in that way it was better than anything else about the morning. He looked down the lane again, and this time his mother's truck was there, an old Ford with primer showing like the coat of a patched horse. There was a sticker in the back window, a winged skull stitched with a lightning bolt that said less about death than about speed, and when she slowed, the truck did it like a big animal that could have outrun everything if it had wanted to. Leah Calder stepped out in boots that had known wet barns and dry courtrooms. Her braid was tucked up in a black cap. She had a mechanic's rag in her back pocket and a grease smudge on one cheek that looked like war paint if you knew what you were looking at. She saw Mathis before she fully saw him, mothers like her do, but she didn't run. She walked the way she would if nothing were wrong, because moving fast would make other people feel they had something to watch. "You good?" she asked, quiet enough to be truth, loud enough to be law. "Yes, ma'am," Mathis said. He meant it, which didn't mean he was fine. He saw the way her eyes flicked once to the scrape on his palm and once to the set of his jaw. Those small looks were a language he'd learned before any alphabet. Behind her, Cole laughed again down by the lane like he'd discovered a sound that meant the world owed him its lunch. Leah lifted her face toward that sound with a look that had cost men money to ignore. Then she looked back at Mathis and reached out, thumb smoothing the dust at his temple. "You want me to handle it?" she asked. Mathis glanced toward Mr. Garvey and then the wide, empty morning. He wanted two things at once, and both were true, to handle it himself, and for someone older than cruelty to stand between him and one more bruise. He said the thing that surprised him when he heard it come out of his mouth. "Not for me," he said. "For next time." Leah's mouth did a small thing that wasn't a smile because the moment didn't deserve a smile. "All right," she said. "For next time." She turned and walked toward the lane. Mathis followed because sometimes you have to watch the weather up close. Cole stood at the bed of his own truck now, tossing a sack up and catching it back because gravity is reassurance when you feel too big for your bones. He saw Leah and squared himself. He wasn't afraid. That was the worst part about him, he didn't know how to be. "Morning, Miss Calder," he said, giving her that particular respect country boys use when they're practicing for judges. "Cole," Leah said. She stopped 3 paces from him. She did not look at his friends, they weren't the point. "You put your hands on my boy?" Cole grinned like a pie left in a window. "No, ma'am." He fell. Leah's head tilted as if she could listen to whether a word had skeleton or only skin. She looked past him at Mr. Garvey, who softened and then looked away. She said. "Here's the thing. Boys who fall don't collect bruises in the shape of another boy's hand." She reached gently and touched Mathis's shoulder where the pink would yellow by evening. Her voice stayed level, it had the strength of a fence post that someone had tamped till the dirt couldn't accept any more. Cole shrugged, the gesture loose as rope on a nail. "Didn't mean nothing by it," he said. "We were playing." Leah nodded as if new information had just arrived on a wind that blew only for her. "You know what, I believe you," she said. "I believe nobody taught you the difference, so you can't know it yet." She stepped to the side and her hand went into her back pocket, not for a weapon, but for her phone. The case was scuffed and the glass had one hairline crack like a fault line running west. "Let me help you with that." She held the phone where he could see the screen and tapped a name Mathis had never seen her use in daylight. "You calling your sister's book club?" Wyatt said, laughing with his mouth while his eyes studied the exit he'd use if the world tilted. Leah's eyes didn't leave Cole's. "I'm calling men who understand the difference," she said. "So you can learn it, too." Cole's smile twitched. "You threatening me, ma'am?" "No," Leah said. She was polite like a storm front. "I'm setting a table. You can eat, or you can go hungry. Either way, my boy walks through this town without your hands on him." The call connected. Leah's face changed in a way Mathis had only seen when the far hills caught lightning at night and turned into black silhouettes of themselves. "Hey, Crow," she said, and the name laid a shadow across the morning that made the J silent again. "Yeah. It's Leah. I need a favor. Bring everyone who's not in the shop or in a hospital bed." "No, not for me. For a kid who's going to be a better man than most of y'all. Co-op lot." 10 minutes. She listened, and her mouth bent into something like relief. All right, she said softly. I'll owe you pie. She hung up and put the phone back, an ordinary motion that made the morning decide to be a different kind of day. Cole barked a laugh. What, the old freaks in leathers, he said. The county road won't hold them. Leah looked at his truck, at the place where his tail light was cracked and fixed with red tape. She looked at the sticker on his rear window, a skull that meant nothing and everything to boys who needed meaning. She scanned the hanging keys on his belt loop, at the length of chain that said he wanted to be seen. Then she looked at him like a mother looks at a thorn she's decided to pull. Go on, she said. You got 8 minutes to figure out whether you want to apologize like a man or be corrected like a boy. Cole's face went red in a way more embarrassing than anger. Men don't like to be given clocks. He stepped forward, and even standing still Leah felt like she'd taken a step toward him. He opened his mouth. He found nothing in it worth the air. He backed away slow as if distance could unmix the day. Wyatt and Kellen stuck with him like birds that haven't chosen a coat yet. Mathis stood beside his mother and felt something in his chest not a little. It didn't mean anything was over. It meant something had begun that he hadn't asked for but maybe could live through. Let's load, Leah said to him like she hadn't just tilted the county. They stacked the bales into the truck bed, to and lift and slide, the way their bodies had learned together. Her shoulder brushed his once, and in that touch was a whole letter she didn't have to write. I saw you. I'm here. I'll stand until I don't have to. He answered with the particular pride that happens to boys when they do work beside their mothers. The sound came first as a rumor the road told its ditches, a distant braid of engine notes. Mathis knew tractors and combines and stock trailers by sound. This was none of those. It was closer to thunder, and then it was less like anything else at all. A line of motorcycles came over the low hill from town, sunlight taking the chrome into its own hands and throwing it back like fish. They didn't come fast, they came certain. The lead bike wore a fairing painted flat black with a white winged skull pinned like a medal on one side. The rider was a big man in old denim and a patched vest, gray in the beard, helmet black as a crow's back. The bikes turned into the co-op lot and arranged themselves without instructions. A habit can look like magic if you've never seen it practiced. They didn't block exits, they didn't crowd the doors. They formed a wide semicircle that left space in the middle for anyone who wanted to speak or run. It was choreography learned in parking lots and at funerals. The air changed, the morning had more oxygen in it somehow. Cole swore under his breath. Wyatt's grin ran off his face. Kellen adjusted his belt for no reason. Mr. Garvey stepped back into his warehouse, then stepped out again because he remembered that hiding wasn't a quality he admired in himself. The big man cut his engine and dropped a boot, and the rest of the bikes went quiet one heartbeat later in a smooth ripple. When the engine stopped, Mathis could hear the ticks of hot metal cooling like a dozen clocks choosing the same time. The big man swung off and walked forward. His patch red redwood original in a shape Mathis had only seen once, on a postcard in Leah's kitchen that came the week after his father died, a card that smelled like cigars and road dust and said nothing at all about love but proved it anyway. Leah, the man said, and his voice rolled like a gravel truck in low gear. You baking? I said pie, Leah answered, and for the first time that morning she smiled, quick and dangerous as a bird's shadow. You brought everybody. Most everybody, he said, turning his head just enough for Mathis to see the scar that crossed his eyebrow like bad handwriting. Crow, he said to Mathis, tapping his chest. Your mama's people. Mathis nodded because words were heavy right then and he didn't want to drop any. Crow's eyes were bright and not unkind. He bent a little to be on Mathis's level without performing it. Heard we might need a teach-in, he said softly. You hurt? A sound rose up the lane then, a quick machine note not like the others. Mathis turned his head and saw a pickup he knew without liking, the sheriff's department's extra truck, unmarked except for the cleanliness that machinery owned by everyone always seemed to have. It came in faster than was needed. It braked hard enough to nosedive, and Sheriff Brixby himself stepped out, hat shadow cutting his eyes into pieces. He took in the bikes. He took in his son. He looked at Leah and then at Crow, and his mouth tightened like a knot that would break fingernails before it came loose. "Problem here?" he asked, the tone suggesting he was ready to pick one up if none had been provided. Leah's voice was calm enough to make a man sick to his stomach if he expected fear. "No problem," she said. "Community meeting. Your boy made an apology. We're deciding on a small plan for making the day go better than it started." Brixby's eyes touched Cole's face, found the truth, then refused it. He stepped toward Crow. You could smell the soap on him. Mathis felt the air around his ribs get smaller. He looked at his mother without moving his head and saw her thumb slide into her front pocket, where she kept nothing but the knowledge of how to stand. "You don't come into my county and threaten my boy," Brixby said. "I don't care who you rode with in '98. The words dropped like nails on concrete, loud and not landing anywhere useful. Crow's face didn't change. "I threaten men," he said. "Boys get words. Your boy got words." He stepped half a foot forward, and in that small motion was a sketch of every funeral he had stood through and every breakfast he had eaten with men who decided to grow up. "You want to make it a different kind of meeting?" The line of bikes didn't move, but the whole lot leaned in a fraction. Mr. Garvey took a half step closer to Leah without really knowing he had. Digger wormed out from under the dock, put his shoulder against Mathis's shin, and stared at the sheriff with the flat disapproval of a dog who has seen too many gates left open. Brixby smiled. It wasn't a nice smile, but it was steady. 90 motorcycles is a lot of paperwork," he said. "I could call state." Crow nodded. "You could," he said. "You could also call my wife and tell her I won't be home for supper. Only one of those things scares me." The riders laughed again, but it didn't go anywhere. It added weight to his words instead of taking it away. Leah spoke then, and her voice hung in the air like a choice waiting to be taken. "He's coming by at 6:30 to help with wood," she said, nodding toward Cole. "Bring a jacket. We'll eat on the porch. 7:30, we cut extra slabs for the old folks on Danner Road. 8, home. Sunday, supper. You bring the boy and whatever part of your pride you can sit with. I'll bake. You can talk with Crow here about policies and neighbors." She made it sound like a church bulletin. Brixby stared like a person who had been handed a map to a place he just denied existed. "I'm not agreeing to," he began. The second set of sirens reached them then, thin at first and then full as the ambulance cleared the hill. It slid into the lot and nosed toward the feed warehouse, lights doing that red-blue that scrubs all nuance out of faces. 2 EMTs hopped out and looked around, confusion knitting their eyebrows. "Call was for a kid bleeding at the co-op," the driver said to the air. His eyes found Mathis, then left him. "Anybody see a kid?" Mr. Garvey lifted a hand like he wanted to be helpful. Brixby opened his mouth. Leah said, "No one's bleeding." But Mathis had felt that old sense all morning, that threat under the obvious. Before anyone decided what word to use next, a sound came from the far side of the warehouse, a sharp clatter, then a yell that wasn't a boy's and wasn't pretending. A man stumbled around the corner with one hand on his forearm. Blood sheeted down between his fingers like a broken pipe. "Table saw," he gasped. "Jesus, he looked at the riders like a miracle had motor oil on it. "Anybody? I can't." The world contracted to a point. Leah was already moving. She had the rag from her pocket in her hands on his arm before the EMTs finished turning. Crow said one word, "Magpie," and 2 men were at the back of the nearest bike pulling a med kit that looked military. The ambulance crew arrived and folded into the choreography like they'd rehearsed it with these strangers all their lives. Brixby froze with his mouth open and his hat shadow making him look worse than he was. Cole made a sound like a dog losing a dream. Mathis felt the old drumbeat go to a speed he didn't know it had. He took Digger's collar and held on because sometimes holding on to a dog is the only thing you can do to help. Leah's voice ran cool. "Pressure," she told the EMT. "He's white under his eyes." The EMT nodded and moved where she put him. They didn't fight, because competence is a kind of uniform nobody wants to argue with. The man on the ground bit his lip, and the sawdust all over his jeans mixed with blood into something you didn't want to think about. "I'm sorry," he said for no reason anyone could understand. "You're all right," Leah said. "You're fine." She lied, the kind of lie that casts a rope over a person and drags them back to shore. "You're going to count to 20 for me." "I can't," he said, and his eyes slid sideways like the morning was tilting him off. "You can," she said. "Start now." 1, he said, and then the siren of the morning was not a siren anymore, it was a coil of people who knew what to do. Mathis stood back and watched his mother make the day into something she could hold in both hands. He felt the shape of pride move through him, hot and clean and nothing like the brittle thing that broke in Cole's voice. He didn't think about the moment on the dock. He thought about the wood to be stacked in the evening and the pie cooling on the rails and the way the bike's engines had gone quiet like a choice someone made. The man reached 20, and the EMTs had the bleeding wrapped. They lifted him. The ambulance doors shut with an authority that comforted. It pulled out, siren down because the morning had already provided enough announcement. Mr. Garvey stood blinking like a man who had expected a different story but loved this one better. Brixby adjusted his hat. He looked at Crow. He looked at Leah. You could see him try to put his badge into the scene and fail, it didn't have a place to hang. 6:30, he said, words gravelly like they'd been hauled across a rough lot. He didn't say it to Leah. He said it to his boy. Cole nodded. Sunday, Leah said. Supper. He nodded again. He got in his truck and didn't peel out like he wanted to. He left like a man who had been given homework by a teacher he didn't like but respected. The bikes didn't move yet. Crow looked at Leah. You want 10 to stay? Leah shook her head. No, she said. I want pie. Magpie grinned. We'll go rustle up ice cream. Crow nodded to Mathis. You did good, he said, and the words fell into Mathis's chest like seeds you forgot you planted until the rain comes. The line of bikes fired one by one, not in unison but in agreement. They rolled out without hurry, 2 riders staying at the edges like shepherd dogs do when the flock moves toward a gate. Leah watched them until the last chrome blink fell behind the hill. The lot got quiet in a way Mathis had never loved more. Load the rest? She asked. Yeah, he said. They stacked. They strapped. They signed Mr. Garvey's triplicate forms. He couldn't meet their eyes. He said thank you and meant it and also hated that it needed saying. In the truck, the bench seat squeaked a small complaint. Digger jumped into the footwell and curled like a comma touching Mathis's boot. The road away from the co-op ran between fields the color of a faded baseball cap. Mathis watched the fence posts go by, counted every 5th one because counting sometimes calmed the part of him that didn't believe in endings. You okay? Leah asked, eyes on the road. She kept her voice ordinary in case he needed ordinary. I will be, he said. That felt like a thing he owned. You want to talk about it? She asked. He thought of Cole's hands and the way Mr. Garvey's mouth had formed words that left a bruise, too. He thought of Crow's boots and the sound of the engines coming up over the hill. He thought of the man with the socket arm and the quick, precise way Leah's hands had moved. He said, I'd rather stack wood. She nodded. Good plan, she said. After a mile, you said 4 next time. He looked out at the cattle, their heads down in the pale grass. I don't want to have to call anybody again, he said. I want them to know before. That's most of the thing, she said quietly. All the way from kitchen tables to county courthouses. They took the long way home, passing the school. Cole's truck sat in the lot, alone. Mathis wondered if Cole was inside, asking for the policy. He hoped he was. He hoped he wasn't. Boys have to learn their maps without getting stuck in the wrong towns. At the farm, the afternoon slid across the pasture like a slow hand smoothing a quilt. They unloaded. They stacked in a neat rick along the north wall where the wind wouldn't steal warmth. Leah cut pie crust while Mathis hosed the mud off the truck's wells. The dog sat watchful like a man who'd decided to quit tobacco. The house smelled like cinnamon and something else layered under it that Mathis couldn't name but would forever know. At 6:20, a pickup eased into the ruts. It wasn't the unmarked truck. It wasn't any county vehicle at all. It was Cole's old Ford with the tail light crack, and the boy came around its hood alone, his hands empty in the correct way. He had a jacket. He had a look that said the day had been longer than any plan he'd ever made. Leah nodded to him. "Wood's over here," she said. "Stack tight. We got wind out of the west coming." He nodded and moved the way a person moves when he's trying not to remember how he moved earlier. They stacked in silence for a while, work giving everyone a helmet they could wear on the inside. Then Cole cleared his throat. "I read the policy," he said to the wood, not to Mathis. "It's dumb in places. But I read it." "Good," Leah said from the porch where she was cutting pie. She didn't add anything, and the not adding was a bigger kindness than a speech. They carried 2 stacks to old Mr. Snow's place on Danner Road. The man was almost 90 and had opinions about split sizes that would have annoyed God. He put his good hand on Mathis's head the way old men do as if they're checking the weather. He looked at Cole and then at Leah and decided to say nothing because the important things were not yet cooked. Back at the house, Leah set pie on the porch rail and 3 bowls of ice cream that sweated even in the March cool like they had done something to be ashamed of. Cole ate slow, measuring each bite like penance. He had never eaten Leah's pie before. It made a man consider truth. Headlights turned into the ruts at 7:35. The unmarked truck. You could feel the farm flinch slightly. Sheriff Brixby got out alone. He stood at the bottom step with his hat in his hand like a person might stand at a funeral where he knew the dead deserved better. Leah nodded once. "Pie," she said. "No thank you," he said, which was a mistake because it made everyone notice the pie and what it meant. He cleared his throat. "Cole," he said. "We'll go." Cole looked at Leah and then at Mathis and then at his father. He stood. The woodpile leaned against the last of the light like a shoulder. The night gathered at the pasture fence and listened. Leah wiped her hands on a towel. "Sunday," she said. Brixby nodded a bad nod. "We'll see," he said. Crow's headlights swept the yard then, 2 bikes this time, quiet as big cats. They didn't come up the drive, they stopped on the road. Crow lifted a hand. Leah lifted hers back. Mathis felt the hair on his arms rise for no reason he could articulate. He turned his face into the night air because sometimes you need to smell what the dark is bringing. The phone in Leah's back pocket buzzed. She checked the screen. Her mouth flattened. "What is it?" Mathis asked, and the way she didn't answer made the property lean toward her like a man in a stone leaning toward a candle. She looked at Brixby. She looked at Crow. She looked at her boy. "It's the school," she said. "They say there's been a fight behind the gym. Older boys. A knife." The porch went very quiet. The dog stood up. Leah's eyes met Mathis's and in them he saw the old drumbeat turn into a siren he'd never heard before. "Get in the truck," she said, and there was no air left in the word. The farm held its breath, and Mathis heard, faint and terrible, the first echo of engines turning over far off in town, as if the day had not been finished with its instruction at all. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The word kept ringing in Mathis's head like a bucket scrape as Leah's truck leapt off the ruts and bit the county blacktop. He had Digger's collar wrapped in his fist and his other hand braced against the dash. The farm fell away behind them, pasture turned to fence, fence to mailboxes, mailboxes to the low brick of the school where the gym sat like a sleeping animal with its back against the creek. The evening light made everything thin and sharp, as if the sun had been honed on a whetstone for this 1 hour. The engines he'd heard through the phone became real on the wind. Not the big chorus from the co-op, this was a handful, pared down to purpose. Crow's bike led, Magpie on his flank, 2 others fanned behind with their lights ghosting the ditches. They didn't crowd Leah, they kept station like this was a cattle drive and she was the one with the bell cow. Leah didn't waste words. "You keep your feet under you," she said. "You watch my hands. If I say the word back, you go to the truck. No speeches." "Yes, ma'am." Mathis tasted metal under his tongue and realized he'd bit the inside of his cheek. He kept the blood where it was, some things were better swallowed. They slid into the back lot by the maintenance shed where the dumpsters threw long blue shadows. A knot of older boys stood in the space behind the gym, the place where the brick wall trapped heat in winter and mosquitoes in summer. Two stood apart in the middle, one hunched against the wall, one with his arm held out at an unnatural angle. Mathis saw the glint of a blade, small and hateful as a lie. The smell of fear had a sweetness to it he'd learned at calving time. He looked up and clocked the angle of the security camera, wrong, pointed at the doors. The blind spot was intentional, the way a fisherman leaves a hole big enough for the biggest fish to slip through. Leah killed the engine. "Stay," she said, and even the dog understood. She stepped out into the windless square like she'd walked onto a porch to knock, no rush, no show. Crow ghosted into position at her shoulder, Magpie a pace back. The two other riders peeled wide to the corners, not menacing, not timid. They filled the shape of the space so that Panic had fewer places to hide. The knife boy was 17 maybe, long hair shoved under a cap, jaw working like he was chewing on the argument he planned to make to himself later. His name slid into Mathis's head uninvited, Tyler Voss. He'd seen him with a varsity hoodie knotted at his elbows last fall, swaggering in the bleachers, benign as a barn cat when adults were watching. Tonight he looked like a calf that had found a way through the fence and was furious to discover the grass tasted the same on the other side. "Tyler," Leah said, and she made his name sound like a doorbell. "Put it down." The boy flinched. For a beat he seemed to look for someone else with the same name. Then he grinned, false as plastic. "Ain't doing nothing," he said. "Just talking." The boy at the wall didn't talk at all, he stared at the brick like he wanted to trade faces with it. "Good," Leah said. "Talk empty-handed." She didn't move closer. The wind lifted a strand of her hair, the grease smudge on her cheek had faded into the kind of mark that belongs on a person. Her hands hung easy at her sides, fingers open. "Put it on the ground and step back." A quieted ripple went through the outer ring of boys. They had expected shouting. Adults in a mood made a shape they understood how to play against. Leah didn't give them that shape. She gave them a choice. Tyler's chin quivered a millimeter. He turned the knife like he was appreciating its balance. "Lady," he said just loud enough to assure the others he was still in charge, "you don't know what's going on." "You're right," Leah said, and Mathis felt the sentence unlock something in the air. "I know 3 things. There's a blade. There's a kid who wants the wall to open. And the rest of you came to see who you were." She lifted one finger and pointed at a square of concrete at her feet. "Put it here." Crow didn't speak, but the weight of his stillness said that if the boy set the knife anywhere else in the world, the earth might rotate differently. Magpie's hands were empty, his forearms were not. Tyler's eyes cut to the 4 corners of the world, the riders, Leah, the boys, the parking lot where a sheriff's truck might pull in and make his father's life more complicated. His face wasn't hardened, it was stretched, the way young faces get when they try to be masks before they know the price. He spat, a thing that would have felt like victory any other day. It looked like a boy trying to keep his lips from shaking. "Tyler," another voice said, and it wasn't Leah's or Crow's. Cole stepped between 2 boys and into the space like a person who couldn't stand himself if he didn't. His hands were up. His eyes were clear in a way that made Mathis's chest feel like it had more room. "Put it down." Tyler barked a laugh that sounded like his throat was trying to throw something away. "Shut up, deputy's kid," he said. "You don't get promoted for this." Cole looked at the blade and then at the boy leaning against the wall. "Don't care," he said. "Put it down so you don't find out how much blood you've got." He said it without performance, and it aged him by a year. Outside the square, the ugly magic of a crowd shifted. More eyes moved to Cole than to the knife. The center of gravity slid. Leah's voice stayed level. "That square," she said, pointing again with her chin. "Now." Tyler's hand twitched. The knife made a decisive noise against the concrete, the sound a small thing makes when it gives up pretending to be big. The boy with his back to the wall sobbed once like something punched him in the spine. Magpie moved faster than time and booted the blade away. It spun toward a drain like it had been taught what holes are for. Everything moved then. The crowd surged toward relief or toward the next thing, hard to tell which. Leah cut through motion with one word. "Back." Mathis obeyed. His feet walked him without permission to the passenger side of the truck, where he could see the square and also count the ways it might get worse. Digger pressed his shoulder against Mathis's knee hard enough to bruise and licked the line of grit off his knuckle like maybe there was a rule he could enforce. "Quiet," Crow said, and the evening realized it wanted to hear him. He pointed at two boys. "You, get the principal. You, bring the nurse. Tell her to bring the red kit." The boys moved because men like Crow make verbs easier. Tyler stood in the middle of his own mistake. His face had gone from red to the chalky color you see when a calf gets hung up in barbed wire and knows it. His eyes found Leah's like a person in water finds a fence post. "We were just," he began, and then the rest of the sentence didn't make it. "You were scared," Leah said without sympathy or spite. "And you tried to make the fear stand on somebody else's legs. People do it every day. Today you don't." She stepped sideways so the boy who'd been against the wall could move. "Come on out of there," she told him gently. "You're not a corner." The boy slid along the brick. His name fell out of Cole's mouth. "Evan," he said, like the name had been dropped on the ground and he'd found it. "You all right?" Evan nodded in that way people do when a nod is a raft. Lights arced in from the lot, not sirens, just the building's fluorescent hum leaning its elbows into dusk. Principal Hargett hustled around the corner with Ms. Caswell the nurse, two other teachers in the gravity field. Ms. Caswell went straight to Evan's arm, eyes reading for blood, for bone. The principal's eyes went everywhere and nowhere and landed on Leah. In a small town, adults learn the catalog of other adults' faces fast. He saw competence, no visible fire, in the familiar outline of Crow's jacket patch at the edge of the square. He set his shoulders like a man lucky enough to take a meeting he'd feared. "Ms. Calder," he said. "Boys." His eyes ticked to Tyler and then to the square where the knife had clattered. "What happened?" "Nothing," Tyler said. It was a child's answer offered by a person trying to be a man. "A knife happened," Leah said evenly. "It didn't find a home." She turned her head a degree. "Your camera doesn't cover this corner." Hargett flushed. You could see him deciding whether to defend or absorb. He absorbed. "I'll fix it," he said. He sounded like a man who had replaced a belt on an old mower too many times and decided to buy the right part at last. "Tyler Voss, my office." "Now." Tyler went. The crowd of boys broke into atoms and drifted, some holding the shape of the night with too much carefulness, some already letting it become a story that would grow antlers before morning. Brixby's truck rounded the far corner and stopped hard enough to bump the bumper stops. He stepped out with the face he used when he wanted to make a point and hadn't chosen one yet. "What's all this?" he called, trying to sound like he didn't notice the rider's shapes in his peripheral vision. "Policy," Leah said, and if Hargett flinched, he flinched toward approval. "And neighbors." She didn't elaborate. The truth didn't require garnish. Brixby weighed the options before him, then did an unexpected thing. He looked at his son. "You good?" Cole nodded. "Yes, sir," he said, too quickly to be untrue. Brixby took in the knife, now under Magpie's boot, and the boy not bleeding. He let out a breath he'd been keeping since the co-op and didn't seem to mind that everyone knew it. "Voss?" he asked Hargett. "Office," Hargett said. "I'll be calling his parents." "Do," Brixby said. He looked at Crow. The two men considered the shape of each other like carpenters measuring an old house to see which way it leaned. "Sunday," Brixby said, like it surprised him he meant it. Sunday, Crow agreed, and the agreement put a small plank across a wet ditch. The nurse finished with Evan, scolded no one, and gave Leah a look that meant thanks without making a fuss. Leah took it and set it in that quiet place where she kept other people's better selves to polish when she was tired. It could have ended there. In a tidier story, it might have. Knife down, boys sent home to newly rearranged maps, pie reheated on plates that had seen better holidays. But the day hadn't burned through its fuel yet, and ugly things loved the smell of their own smoke. A black SUV nosed into the back lot, too clean for its dust road, plates that announced town money. The man who stepped out wore a jacket that thought it was charcoal and a smile that credentials itself in places that don't require credentials. He looked at Brixby and didn't see him. He looked at Crow and pretended not to. He looked at Leah and miscalculated. "Evening," he said, like a man entering a bar he'd paid the jukebox not to play country. "I'm here for Tyler." "His father will be," Hargett said. "Until then, school business." The man ignored him the way certain kinds of men learn to ignore waiters, janitors, and principals. He addressed Leah as if the scene needed to be introduced to itself. "This is no place for you," he said in a tone that got him discounts on golf clubs. "And certainly not for these." His hand flapped toward the riders like he was shooing pigeons off a statue paid for by other men's names. Crow smiled without humor. "We brought words," he said. "You got any?" "Plenty," the man said, smile fixed. "All of them end in lawsuit if that child says you threaten him." Leah stepped forward 1 inch. "That was all." The inch said, "I've been shot at by winter and beat back by drought, I do not fear paperwork." "No one threatened him," she said. "We shaped the evening. You're welcome to help." The man's gaze flicked to Brixby in that complicated way men in small places check who owes who a favor. Brixby's jaw worked and then smoothed. "Mr. Voss," he said, and Mathis felt his stomach fall like a trapdoor. The man's last name hung in the darkness with weight. "The principal has it." "So, Tyler's father. The money that sponsored the scoreboard and the new bleachers. The donor plaque that made boys arch their backs walking past, like they had to be taller than the names engraved there." He didn't like the word no. He had the kind of life where it didn't visit often. The confrontation didn't explode. Leah refused to make it that kind. Hargett moved with quiet insistence. Miss Caswell placed herself like a kindly obstacle in a white cardigan, and the riders did the thing they specialized in. They made a wider circle and then stood there like windbreaks. The night pushed around them and gave up. Voss left eventually, his taillights smearing red across the asphalt like 2 insults. Boys went home staring at their shoes and then up at the hard stars and then back at their shoes. The gym doors thunked shut. The creek stitched the whole scene with its invisible thread and pulled it tight. Back at the farm, the woodpile touched shadow and held it. Leah set out a second round of pie because sugar is what you put into a day when you've asked it for too much. Cole helped carry plates in and then stood awkwardly on the porch with his hands looking for pockets. He smelled like gasoline and the particular kind of relief that follows the word crisis. Brixby didn't stay. He tipped his hat, a gesture that meant, in this rare case, exactly what it looked like, and drove off into a night that had decided to be kind to him. Crow lingered. He leaned on the porch post and looked at the yard like men look at battlefields the day after. They don't see ghosts, they see angles. "You did it clean," he told Leah. She shrugged, one shoulder up like a half-joke. "Got lucky," she said. "Luck favors the sleepless." Mathis sat on the steps with Digger's head heavy on his knee. The pie's heat went up his face. He wanted to sleep for a year and wake up knowing how to do algebra and fence corners the right way on the first try. He didn't want to think about knives or policemen or what money does to people's voices. "Thank you," Cole said, sudden, like the gratitude had been riding a bike downhill inside him and finally knew how to brake. He said it to Leah. He turned and said it to Mathis. For earlier, he added, and his mouth worked around the words like they were a tool he'd borrowed and wanted to return in good condition. Mathis nodded. He wished he had something wise to say, something Crow might approve of. What came out was 12 years old and unembarrassed by it. "Stack tight," he said. "Storms come." Cole almost smiled. It made him younger than he'd been an hour ago. "Storms come," he repeated like a vow. They were washing the last forks when the first rock hit the mailbox. It made a cheap, hollow sound, too near for the imagination to place it elsewhere. Leah's eyes cut to Mathis, and Mathis's hands were already on Digger's collar. Crow moved to the door like a man taking a step into his own kitchen. You could smell beer and adolescent courage, the two worst carpenters in any county, trying to build a story they didn't own. Leah raised one hand. "Stay." She stepped onto the porch and made no effort to be quiet. "If you're going to do it," she called into the dark, "do it where faces can be seen. My boy goes to school with you. My table will feed you if you come right." Silence took a shape. Then tires turned in gravel and the night cleared its throat like an old man admitting something. A truck eased back onto the road and went away without hurry, the tone of someone who'd meant to ring a bell and found out it rang back. Leah stood there until the night had nothing else to say. She came back in, and the air around her had that hard-earned cleanness the sky has after rain. "Why would they?" Mathis started, and Leah put her hand on the back of his neck, thumb warm. "Because you can't turn a day like this without hearing it click in 100 places," she said. "Some clicks are good. Some are teeth." "Sheriff will say it was nothing," Cole muttered, then flushed because the disloyalty had spilled before it could dry. "Sorry." Leah shook her head. "He said he'd come Sunday," she said. "That's not nothing." Sunday came as slow as winter and as certain. In the thin light before church bells, Leah rolled out dough. Mathis gathered plates. Cole knocked at 9 with his hair combed like it was apologizing for last year. At noon, an engine that had never waited for anyone in its life came down the ruts and stopped at the porch step. Brixby stepped out in a clean shirt buttoned submissive to the top and a face that had practiced being neutral in the mirror. Crow arrived with Magpie and 2 others. They parked respectfully, noses facing out. They took off their helmets like hats in a sanctuary. Leah set the table long, hospitality stretched from the kitchen to the porch like a runner. Food smells went out into the yard and changed the weather. Old Mr. Snow from Danner Road came limping up the drive, hands out just enough to receive and not ask. Principal Hargett came with a pie he'd obviously bought and transferred to one of his own plates. Everyone politely pretended otherwise. Miss Caswell sent potato salad in her regards. When everyone was seated, Leah bowed her head and said a grace that sounded nothing like a prayer and therefore probably was one. It thanked the Lord for carbs and combustion and the fact that some people show up when called. Halfway through the cornbread, Brixby cleared his throat. "About the co-op," he said. The room tried to sit up straighter without anybody moving. "I got it wrong," he said. The words were simple and therefore expensive. "I should have said something different. I should have stepped in earlier. He didn't find sorry quick enough to make it sound like pride didn't have to be shot first. He found another word that had its own bones. "Learning," he finished, and Leah let it stand because real words walk on their own. Crow nodded and took a drink of sweet tea that would have killed a horse. "Good," he said. "I got boys that needed a better teacher than me when I was their age." He looked at Cole, then at Mathis. "We can do something practical." They did. In the shade of the pecan tree, someone strung a line from one post to the other, and the men and women in leather jackets showed the boys how to tie a tourniquet with a belt and a stick, how to stop bleeding with hands that didn't shake, how to talk someone back to counting. Leah corrected form with 2 fingers. Magpie told stories about accidents that ended with men laughing because the ending had been written well. Hargett took notes for a faculty meeting on Tuesday. Brixby stood with his hands in his pockets and his jaw working and his eyes softening. Old Mr. Snow sat in a lawn chair and kept time with his shoe on the dirt. When the lesson shifted to words, how to say stop so it worked, how to say help so it traveled, Mathis felt something rearrange in his chest, a shelf installed where things could be put away and found again. He watched Cole watch Leah and Crow and Magpie, saw the way the other boy's body replaced some old instructions with better ones. Mathis thought, maybe this is what growing up feels like, not armor but a tool belt with the right things in the right loops. The day gentled. People drifted. The woodpile cast a fat, satisfied shadow. Brixby left with a small paper plate covered in foil the way men bring home trophies they can eat. He put a hand on Cole's shoulder at the truck door and squeezed once, too hard, the way men say a paragraph with one gesture. Crow promised to come back next Saturday with a set of used helmets for the boys who wanted to learn how not to be stupid on dirt bikes. Magpie whistled for Digger and told him secrets in a voice that made the dog flip his ear dramatically. By sundown, the farm felt like it had been aired out. The road lay flat, honest. Mathis and Leah stood at the fence and watched the line of cows pick their way back from the creek. The sky went oil-slick purple. Crickets auditioned. Somewhere a truck door closed 2 farms over and a man told a dog to hush. Leah's phone buzzed in her back pocket. She put it to her ear, listened, and her face changed in a way that took all the twilight and threw it off the porch. "What is it?" Mathis asked, and he didn't like the way his voice sounded like it had a ladder in it. She handed him the phone because her hand needed to hold the rail. It was Principal Hargett. His voice shook as if the words were coins he'd been forced to carry in his mouth. "Tyler Voss didn't come home from his uncle's after church," he said. "His father is calling everyone he can call. There's a note on my voicemail. I think it was meant for me. It just says, 'Tell the lady I'm sorry. Tell her I didn't know what to do with my hands.'" The deputies found his truck by the old quarry. Keys in it. Phone under the seat. No Tyler. Behind Mathis, a low hum feathered the night. 2 bikes down on the road, steady and soft like heartbeats you can hear through a wall. Crow's headlight washed the fence pale. He had not gone far. Men like him don't on days like this. Leah took the phone back, her voice a calm, firm rope. "Okay," she said. "Call the sheriff. We'll meet you at the quarry. Tell Mr. Voss not to touch anything in the truck. We'll need to smell the story as it stands." She hung up. Her eyes met Mathis's, and there was no fear in them, just a kind of distilled love that makes fear decide it doesn't know the address. "Boots," she said. "Light. Water. Tell Digger he's working." Mathis moved. Boots by the door, flashlight in his pocket. He clipped Digger's collar and the dog leaned into the job like he'd been born knowing what quarry means. Leah grabbed the heavy coat and the red kit, the one they'd used on a stranger the day before, and washed and folded for an unknown future. Crow took the step to the porch without asking. "Quarry?" "Quarry," Leah said. He nodded once. His face did that hard soft thing it does when a man has decided he will carry whatever weight the next 10 minutes hand him. He swung a leg over the bike. Magpie's engine ticked to life. The night got its instructions. They were halfway down the ruts when a set of headlights rose out of the low place by the creek, slow and purposeful, not a neighbor's speed. The truck was matte black with a grille that looked like a jaw. It blocked the lane. The window slid down and an arm put a glass bottle on the sill, rag-necked and dark wet, the kind of thing people who don't do their own work always think will do the work for them. Leah's hand went up, palm open. "Wait." Mathis saw the flame tip at the rag's end try to be born and fail, a sputter like a bad idea meeting the air. He heard the lick of it when it caught, small as a whisper. He stepped forward before he knew he was doing it, because some days the story asks you what kind of person you are and expects you to have an answer. Digger growled low, a tractor idling in his chest. "Don't," Leah said, "not to Mathis, not to the man. To the night." It paused, considerate for once. The flame bent sideways under a breath of wind that had not been scheduled. The rag guttered. The man cursed, a clean, frightened sound that told the truth about him. Crow's engine swelled and came to rest, right behind Leah's shoulder, not over her, not waiting. Magpie slid left, a wedge in case the truck decided to forget about neighbors and policy, and jumped straight to the part where fire tries to write its simple poem across a complicated life. The man in the truck leaned forward. Mathis saw his face, and what he saw there wasn't hatred, it was vacancy. The way a house looks after a divorce when the lawn stops paying attention. He saw the absence and felt something in himself get quiet and permanent. Leah took one step. She didn't raise her voice. "You'll want to think real careful," she said. "Because we're going to the quarry to find your boss's boy before the dark finds him first. You want to be the reason we're late?" The man blinked like a deer surprised by a fence. The flame licked his fingers and he yelped, ridiculous as a raccoon caught with a chicken. He threw the bottle, not at the truck, not at them, just away from fire. It shattered in the wet ditch and made a brief, insulting flower. He slammed the truck in reverse and jerked back into the low place too fast. Mud got its teeth in his tires and held. He rocked, cursed, rocked again, and then the engine coughed like it had been asked for something more than it was made to give. Crow's bike idled in the alcohol-sweet air, patient as a fact. Leah didn't spare the man another look. "Let him dig," she said. "We've got a boy to find." She put the truck in gear. Mathis, Digger, Crow, Magpie, and the Knight leaned forward together as if the whole county had decided what it wanted, for the story to surprise itself with a better ending than anyone in it had practiced. They turned onto the county road. The quarry lay beyond the bend, a bowl carved out of an old hurt and filled with water as dark as guilt. Ahead, across the lowland and the line of cottonwoods, more headlights were gathering, some official, some not, all coming for the same reason with different words for it. Mathis felt the old drumbeat return, not slow now, not fast, exactly, steady like a hand laid on a frightened animal until it remembers how to breathe. They topped the hill, and the quarry opened itself like a mouth. And then, from the water, something moved. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.